Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hi, I'm Lily.
Science and Easy English with Oliver and Lily. Are aliens sending us signals?
And before we get too deep into things, I just want to welcome you to today's deep dive. We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are going through a massive stack of sources today. I'm talking like historical Wikipedia archives on the Fermi paradox and SETI, massive NASA reports on technosignatures, and, some really recent astronomical journal articles.
Yeah, and our whole mission today is basically to shortcut your path to being fully informed on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Exactly. And, to frame this right away, we are not indulging in like sci-fi fantasy here. This isn't about little green men.
No, not at all. It's really a rigorous, ongoing scientific detective story. And frankly, you should care about this because humanity is genuinely teetering on the brink of having the technology to finally answer the absolute oldest question in the universe.
Or are we alone?
Right, exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can talk about, the wild technology we're using to actively search for signals, we have to understand why we haven't found anyone yet.
Yeah, the math says we shouldn't be alone.
Right. I mean, think of it like this. Imagine showing up to this massive stadium-sized party, right? You know for an absolute fact that thousands of invitations went out. The catering trucks are parked outside. The massive floodlights are blazing. You can literally smell the food.
It's all set up.
Yeah. But you step inside the arena, and the room is just completely, terrifyingly silent. Not a single whisper.
That's kind of where we are with the universe right now. Is it possible we just aren't listening properly or that we're looking for the wrong things?
Well, yeah, that tension is exactly what we call the Fermi paradox. And to understand it, we kind of have to go back to the summer of 1950.
Oh, right. Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi is walking to lunch at Fuller Lodge with his colleagues. Really brilliant guys. Edward Teller, Herbert York, and Emil Konopinski. Just a casual lunch with some of the smartest people on Earth.
Basically, yeah. And out of the blue, Fermi just stops and asked, "Where is everybody?"
Just laying it all out there.
Right, because he was synthesizing this core problem, the stark discrepancy between the incredibly high probability of advanced alien life existing and the absolute zero conclusive evidence we have for it.
And the sources outline a few potential solutions to this, right? Like the Great Filter, which Robin Hanson introduced back in 1996.
Yeah, the Great Filter theory is fascinating. It suggests that some evolutionary step is just incredibly, almost impossibly rare. Like in biogenesis, the actual leap from dead chemicals to living, replicating cells.
So we might just be the lucky ones who made it through that filter.
Or the terrifying alternative is that the filter is ahead of us, that civilizations inevitably destroy themselves once they reach a certain technological level.
Oh, like nuclear war or engineered pandemics. Yikes.
Yeah. But there's also the dark forest hypothesis from author Lou Sixon. The idea that civilizations intentionally hide because the universe is basically a dark forest full of armed hunters.
Yeah.
If you make noise, you get destroyed.
But wait, I have to point out, humanity has only had radio technology since, 1895?
Yeah, late 19th century.
So that's just a mere blink of an eye on a cosmological scale. I mean, maybe everyone is listening, but nobody is transmitting.
That's a huge point. And why this matters is that we might be dealing with alien governments that are incredibly advanced, but they simply cannot agree on whether it's safe to respond to us. It takes a unified planetary consensus to shout into the dark.
Wow, yeah. So they're just sitting there quietly observing.
Or maybe they're communicating using physics we don't even understand yet.
Right. But if the galaxy is mostly quiet, what happens when we actually do hear a blip? Because we transition now in our sources to humanity's most famous attempt to listen and how it recently got debunked.
Ah, the wild signal.
Yes. August 15th, 1977. The Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University picks up this massive 72-second spike.
And it was at a very specific frequency, right? 420.456 megahertz.
A hydrogen line. And astronomer Jerry Amon is so shocked he literally writes, "Wow," in red pen on the computer printout. But wait, why was it exactly 72 seconds?
So this is a cool mechanical detail. That was precisely how long it took the telescope to sweep that specific point in the sky.
Because of the Earth's rotation, right?
Exactly. The bigger telescope was fixed to the ground. It didn't swivel, so a signal from deep space would enter its field of view, peak in intensity right in the middle, and then fade out over exactly 72 seconds.
That makes it look so incredibly authentic.
It did. For decades, it was the gold standard of a potential alien beacon. But we have a 2024 update from our sources that kind of breaks my heart a little.
Yeah, Abel Mendez from the Planetary Habitability Laboratory, he analyzed all this archival data from the Arecibo Observatory and found what he called mini-wow signals.
Right, and turns out the original signal was very likely natural.
How does nature fake a targeted alien beacon?
Well, Mendez's research suggests it was a sudden brightening from a cold hydrogen cloud in deep space that got struck by a magnetar flare.
A magnetar being like a highly magnetic spinning neutron star.
Exactly. When that intense flare hit the hydrogen cloud, it caused it to basically act like a massive astrophysical laser or a maser, blasting out a concentrated beam of radio waves.
That is just wild. So nature literally spoofed us.
It really did. But this realization led to a massive shift in how we listen, which brings us to SETI at home.
Oh, I love this part. So, launched in 1999, SETI at Home is basically where millions of regular people volunteered their home computers to process Arecibo telescope data. It's like breaking a giant cosmic haystack into millions of pieces and mailing them to people's houses so everyone can look for the needle together.
That is the perfect analogy. And over 21 years, these volunteers sifted through roughly 12 billion signals.
12 billion, that's insane.
It is. And project co-founder David Anderson's team eventually narrowed that massive mountain of data down to the top 100 final candidates.
So they have 100 actual signals of interest now.
Yes, and those are currently being scanned by China's massive fast telescope, the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope. It's the largest, most sensitive radio dish on Earth right now.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If natural radio signals can be so easily confused with, natural magnetar flares, scientists realize we need to look for something harder to fake.
We have to move away from just listening for intent
Mhm.
to looking for exhaust.
Right, so instead of waiting for ET to call us, we're basically looking for their city lights and space smog.
What's fascinating here is that finding an alien civilization might not be a moment of communication at all. It might just be a moment of observation. We're looking for techno-signatures.
Technosignatures, that's a term championed by SETI pioneer Jill Tarter, right?
Yeah, she wanted to distance the actual rigorous science from the whole little green men trope.
Makes sense. So NASA is exploring artificial chemicals in exoplanet atmospheres. And the sources point out that carbon is key here.
Well, yeah, carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe. It's the backbone of complex chemistry. So astronomers are looking for things like nitrogen dioxide pollution, which comes from combustion, or, even more definitively, chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs.
Like the refrigerants and aerosols that ate a hole in our ozone layer in the 80s.
Exactly. CFCs don't just happen naturally if we spot them in a planet's atmosphere. It's pretty much a smoking gun for industrialized civilization.
Wow. And then there's the really big stuff, megastructures, like Dyson spheres.
Oh, yeah. Dyson spheres are hypothetical mega engineering projects where a civilization essentially builds a massive shell or swarm of solar collectors completely around their host star to harvest its energy.
But wait, if they block out the star, how do we see it?
That's the brilliant part. Penn State's Jason Wright points out that no machine is 100% efficient. The laws of thermodynamics dictate that they have to bleed off waste heat.
So we look for unexplained infrared radiation coming from mature stars.
Exactly. The star might be visibly dim, but glowing brightly in the infrared.
Okay, but with all this data looking at billions of radio signals, scanning atmospheres, searching for infrared heat, how do we filter out our own interference? Because Earth is incredibly noisy.
That is where AI comes in. The SETI Institute is now using these advanced NVIDIA AI platforms to analyze something called the twinkling or scintillation of pulsars.
Twinkling, like twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Sort of, yeah. As radio waves travel through the interstellar medium, the deep space between stars, they get warped and scattered by plasma. They twinkle.
Oh, okay.
So by tracking how natural pulsars twinkle, the AI learns what a genuine deep space signal is supposed to look like. It can instantly separate a real interstellar signal from, say, a microwave oven in the observatory kitchen or a passing Earth satellite.
That is brilliant. It's like a cosmic fingerprint check.
Exactly.
Okay, let's play this out. So what does this all mean? Let's say our AI spots a Dyson sphere or China's FAST telescope verifies one of those 100 SETI at home signals. We found them. The world is about to change forever. What is the actual plan?
Well, that falls under the first SETI protocol, which is also known as the Declaration of Principles.
Right, originally drafted by diplomats, and our sources say it's currently being updated by Michael Garrett's committee.
Yes. And step one is absolutely crucial. Authenticate.
Because you do not want to be the astronomer who cries alien by mistake.
Exactly. Strict verification by independent observatories is completely necessary. You have to stop scientists from jumping the gun and, making fools of themselves or causing a global panic.
And then step 2 is transparency.
Right. Once it's independently verified, the public has to be informed and the UN Secretary General must be notified. You can't just hide this kind of discovery.
But it's not just astronomers who take over at that point, right? There's a post-detection committee.
Yeah, and the protocol mandates that this committee includes anthropologists like Catherine Denning from our sources, as well as lawyers and social scientists.
To help humanity process the sheer psychological shock of the news.
Precisely. It's going to be a paradigm shift unlike anything in human history.
But wait, if we get a message, who gets to reply? Like, can a rogue billionaire or a single country just shoot a message back into the dark on their own?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the most dangerous scenario possible. Principle 6 of the protocol states very clearly, no unilateral replies.
So no one can just say hello without asking everyone else first.
Right. It requires an international consensus via the United Nations, because responding is inherently dangerous.
We're back to the dark forest hypothesis.
Exactly. Cautious alien governments might be doing the exact same thing we are observing the dark forest rule, choosing to listen but passing strict laws to never, ever speak.
Man, that's heavy. But to you, listening to this deep dive, you are now fully equipped to understand the real science behind those flashy headlines. You know that the search for life isn't just about big radio dishes anymore. It's about distributed computing, space smog, AI, and even international law.
It's a massive multidisciplinary effort. And I want to leave you with one final kind of mind-bending fact from the sources to mull over.
Oh, yeah, this is my favorite part.
So if we do ever make contact, how will we actually speak to them? I mean, they'll have totally different biology, different evolution. But recently, researchers discovered that honeybees can perform simple math.
Wait, really? Honeybees?
Yeah, they can add and subtract by one, and they can even recognize odd and even numbers.
That is just incredible.
It is, because if an insect on our own planet, an animal that is completely evolutionarily divorced from humans, shares the universal language of math, then perhaps math is the one true bridge. It might be the only language that will finally allow us to communicate across the cosmic dark.
Wow. That's a profound way to look at it. One player, one is two, no matter what galaxy you're in.
Exactly.
So keep your eyes on the stars, everyone, and stay curious. Goodbye.